Michael Turner had spent most of his adult life in a uniform. The desert sands of Afghanistan and Iraq had shaped him more than any school, church, or family home ever had. He was a man carved by discipline, sharpened by adrenaline, and hardened by loss. To the younger soldiers, he was the definition of a model officer, lean, confident, razor-focused, with a voice that could command a room and a stare that could slice through the thickest fog of hesitation. But behind all that strength lay a bitterness so deep it had become part of his bloodstream. Michael no longer believed in God, not in any vague spiritual sense, but in a way that burned, in a way that demanded rejection. To him, faith was nothing more than a crutch for the weak, a lullaby whispered by people afraid to face the brutal truth of the world. He used to say it casually, sometimes even with humor. But after the war, took the one person he loved most, his younger brother. Daniel Michael's disbelief hardened into contempt. Every soldier knows the moment the world changes. For Michael, it happened on a hot morning outside Fallujah, when a single IED turned a routine patrol into a nightmare he could never forget. Daniel's death tore a hole in him that no medal, no mission, no therapy could close. And when the chaplain stood beside him that night, offering prayers and gentle words of divine comfort, Michael snapped. "If your God cared," he spat, "he would have stopped that bomb." The chaplain tried to answer gently, but Michael walked away. And from that day on, he walked away from faith entirely. Years later, stationed at a quiet U.S. base, stateside, Michael carried that anger like shrapnel, lodged deep inside. It didn't always show, but it was there, under the jokes, under the discipline, under the perfect posture and polished boots. His fellow officers knew him as tough, sharp-witted, occasionally cynical, but few knew how venomously he rejected anything religious. The military was filled with people of all beliefs, and Michael respected them as soldiers, but he didn't respect what they believed. In fact, he mocked it. Sometimes it was disguised as sarcasm. Sometimes, after a long shift at the firing range, it came out raw. "Jesus won't fix a jammed rifle, physics will." Or, during training briefings, "If God takes the wheel, we're all crashing." Some laughed. Some rolled their eyes. A few prayed silently for him. Michael didn't care. His quarters were meticulously clean. Bed tight, boots polished, weapons checked, everything in its rightful place. But among the order, among the military precision, there was one space deliberately empty. His wall. Where other soldiers hung crosses, medals, or verses sent from home, Michael left his wall bare, as though refusing to give God even a square inch to stand on. His closest colleague, Sergeant Avery Barnes, had tried many times to soften him. "You weren't always like this," Avery told him one evening during a slow patrol around the base perimeter. Michael shrugged. "War changes people. Faith changes people too." "Yeah," Michael said, "into idiots." Avery sighed, but he didn't push further. He respected Michael too much to argue. Still, something in the way Michael said it so sharp, so gleefully cruel, worried him. One Friday night, the officers gathered at a small off-base bar, a place where American flags hung from the walls and old country music leaked from dusty speakers. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. They drank, joked, argued about football, complained about training schedules. Michael sat among them, confident, relaxed, more talkative than usual. Liquor always loosened the contempt in him. A new soldier, young and earnest, mentioned that he kept a rosary in his pocket during deployments. "It helped me feel safe," the kid said, almost apologetically. Michael laughed loudly, sharply drawing several eyes toward him. "You really think beads saved your life?" he said. "They gave me courage," the kid replied quietly. "Courage comes from muscle and training, not fairy tales." A hush fell over the table. Avery placed his beer down. "Mike, enough." But Michael wasn't done. His anger, always simmering just out of sight, rose like a tide. He told the story of his brother not gently, not vulnerably, but as a weapon. "My brother prayed every night," he said, jabbing a finger at the table. "And he died at 19. God didn't save him, God doesn't save anyone. The world is chaos. You survive because you fight, not because you kneel. No one argued. No one dared. But something changed that night. Something subtle. Something dangerous. Michael's rejection of God had always been intellectual, cynical, but now it burned with defiance. As if, deep down, some part of him wasn't just denying God, he was challenging him, and somewhere, far beyond Michael's understanding, that challenge was heard. He didn't know it yet, couldn't have imagined it, but the path he had chosen, mockery, pride, defiance, was leading him toward a moment that would shatter everything he believed. And it would begin far sooner than he expected. Michael Turner had always been sharp-tongued, but in recent months, his bitterness had evolved into something heavier, something that bordered on aggression. The resentment nesting inside him no longer stayed quiet. It clawed outward, especially whenever someone dared mention faith. His fellow officers noticed the shift long before he did. Conversations that once skirted around religion now felt like walking through a minefield. Even casual remarks, "My mom's praying for me," or "Thank God that mission ended safely," could spark a debate Michael had no intention of losing. It wasn't that he enjoyed arguing. It was that he needed to. Every time someone spoke about God, Michael felt an invisible hand pressing against the old wound he carried inside his chest. He couldn't stand it. He wouldn't let it go. So he fought it. Fought faith. The way he used to fight enemies. With precision, intensity, and the determination to crush the threat entirely. Sergeant Avery Barnes saw it most clearly. He'd known Michael for years, long before the anger hardened into something darker. "You've got to calm down," Avery warned one afternoon while they walked across base. "People believe different things. That doesn't make them stupid," Michael scoffed. "Believing in invisible skyfathers? Sounds pretty stupid to me. You're pushing people away." "Good," Michael said. "Maybe they'll stop feeding me fairy tales." Avery stopped walking and turned toward him. "This isn't about them. It's about you. About Daniel." For a moment, Michael froze. His jaw tightened. His eyes flashed. And something older than anger, something closer to grief, shook through his voice. "Don't," he said. "Don't bring him into this." Avery didn't. But the words hung between them, like a door Michael refused to open. The turning point came on a Friday night, another gathering at the small off-base military bar where laughter was loud, boots were muddy, and secrets flowed as freely as the cheap beer. The walls were lined with flags and framed photos of soldiers past. The place had seen tears, confessions, and celebrations. Tonight, it would see something different. Michael arrived already irritated, though he couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the long week, maybe the heat, maybe the way memories of Daniel had kept creeping into his mind like a ghost refusing to leave. He joined the group at a booth near the back. Avery, Corporal Diaz, Lieutenant Blake, and a few younger recruits, eager to be part of the older circle. Someone ordered a round of drinks. Country music hummed in the background. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then Private Jackson, the youngest of the group, mentioned church. It was innocent enough, just a passing comment about attending Mass that Sunday before deployment. Michael's eyebrow arched. "Still doing that? Still praying?" Jackson shrugged with an awkward smile. "It helps me. Gives me peace." "Peace?" Michael scoffed. "You get peace from wishful thinking?" Avery shot him a warning look. "Mike, not now." But Michael wasn't in a mood to be reined in. Something restless pulsed inside him tonight. A need to challenge, to dominate, to prove something no one was asking him to prove. Diaz tried to lighten the tension. "Let the kid believe what he wants. No harm in it." "There's harm," Michael said sharply. "You think faith makes you stronger, but it makes you blind. You put your life in imaginary hands instead of your own." Jackson shifted uncomfortably. "I don't rely on it instead of training. It just gives me courage." "No," Michael said, leaning forward. "Courage comes from discipline, from reality, not from bedtime stories." A hush settled over the table. Even the music in the background seemed quieter now. Avery sighed. "Mike, You're doing it again." "Doing what?" Michael snapped. "Speaking the truth? Picking fights with people who aren't fighting you." Michael felt heat rise through his chest. He took another swallow of bourbon, the burn edging his anger into recklessness. "Let me make something clear," he said loudly, glancing around as though addressing the whole room. "If God existed, if he was real at all, he had his chance to prove it." Jackson swallowed. "Mike, I get that you're hurting. Don't pretend you get anything." Michael cut in. Another officer at a nearby table glanced over, sensing the rising tension. Michael slammed his glass down. "You want to know what I think?" he said. "I think faith is a joke. I think the whole idea of some divine protector is pathetic." Avery put a hand on his shoulder. "Enough." Michael shrugged him off, stood up, and raised his voice even louder. "If God is real," he declared, "let him stop me." The words rolled through the bar like thunder. Heads turned, conversations halted, a few soldiers murmured prayers under their breath. Even those who weren't religious felt a chill spread through the room. Avery stood up quickly. "Sit down, Turner. You've had too much to drink." But Michael wasn't listening. His eyes were wild, not with rage, but with a wounded pride that had nowhere else to go. "Come on," he shouted. "If he's up there, if he's watching, prove it." Diaz muttered, "Man, don't do this. Don't mock God like that." Michael laughed. "What's he gonna do? Strike me with lightning?" Silence. Heavy. Electric. He didn't know it, but his challenge, reckless, prideful, bitter, would echo far beyond that bar. Every word he spoke that night would come back to him, not as a metaphor, not as a lesson, but as a reality that would soon tear his world apart. Avery grabbed his arm. "Michael, enough. Please." Michael jerked away. "I'm not scared of a God who never showed up." Inside him, something cracked. It wasn't faith, he had none to crack. It was the fragile shell of arrogance he had built around his grief. Tonight, he shattered it himself, piece by piece. And somewhere, in a way Michael could never have understood, something in the world shifted in response. The mockery he hurled into the air did not disappear. It echoed, and soon it would return to him, not as punishment, but as truth. A truth he would never forget. The night that changed Michael Turner's life began like countless others, loud, reckless, and soaked in more alcohol than reason. It was past midnight on the base, the kind of hour when discipline dissolves and shadows stretch longer than they should. Inside the rec room, only a few lamps glowed dimly, casting soft amber halos across the scattered pool tables, posters, and mismatched couches soldiers used after long shifts. Most of the men had already left for the night, but a handful lingered, Avery Barnes among them, along with Diaz, Jackson, and two younger recruits, still clinging to the high of late-night camaraderie. The air smelled of beer and fried wings, and the old ceiling fan hummed overhead like a restless whisper. Michael sat at the center of it all, boots planted wide, bottle in hand, staring at nothing. He was more drunk than usual, drunk in the way that scraped against the edges of danger, drunk enough that the weight of his past and the bite of his pride felt indistinguishable. It was Private Collins, impulsive, eager, a little too easily influenced, who broke the uneasy quiet. "Hey," he said, voice slurred with a mischievous grin. "You want to see something funny?" Avery sighed. "Please don't start." Collins ignored him and disappeared into the supply closet. A moment later, he emerged holding a wooden statue, 12 inches tall, hand-carved, beautiful in a simple way. It was a depiction of Jesus on the cross, probably donated years ago by some chaplain or brought back by a soldier from overseas. Collins set it on the table. The flickering lamp behind it cast the figure in a warm glow, giving the crucified Christ a strangely lifelike presence. "Found this in the old chaplain's storage," Collins said. "Thought it looked symbolic." Michael snorted. "Symbolic of what? Sentimental nonsense? Or faith?" Jackson murmured. Michael shot him a glare but said nothing. Collins leaned in. "You've been talking big for weeks, Turner. Talking like faith's a joke, like God's some imaginary friend. So," his smile sharpened, "if you think it's all worthless, prove it." A hush fell across the room. Diaz shook his head instantly. Don't do that. Collins, put it back. But Collins was enjoying the tension. He nudged the statue closer to Michael. Come on. If your words mean anything, show us. Michael's jaw tightened. Heat pulsed in his veins, not from the alcohol, but from the sense of being challenged, cornered, exposed. Pride rose like a wicked tide. Avery whispered a warning. Mike, forget it. Go to bed. Michael didn't move. Collins wasn't done. He laughed, loud enough to cover the unease of the others. Bring out the hammer, he said, half joking, half taunting. Diaz swore under his breath. Don't bring that into this. But it was too late. Collins had gone back to the closet and returned with a small toolbox, one the soldiers used for repairs. He flipped it open dramatically and pulled out a metal hammer, placing it beside the wooden Christ like a twisted offering. The room felt colder. Avery stood up. Stop this right now. This isn't funny. Oh, relax, Collins said. We're just messing around. But even he seemed nervous now. Michael stared at the statue. The carved face of Christ looked serene, sorrowful, as though watching him with quiet patience. It made something uncomfortable twist inside him, something he tried to drown with another gulp of liquor. Collins pushed again. You said God's not real. You shout it every time you drink. So prove it. Michael's fingers twitched. His pride so fragile and yet so enormous flared hot. A memory flickered in the back of his mind. Daniel, his brother lying cold in a hospital bed. A whispered prayer unanswered. His throat tightened. Avery stepped closer, voice low and steady. Michael, this isn't you. Walk away. Michael didn't walk away. He grabbed the hammer. A gasp cut through the room. Jackson Pale shook his head. Man, don't mess with things you don't understand. Diaz echoed him. Seriously, Mike. Enough. But Michael was far past reason. The alcohol, the grief, the pride, it all wrapped around him like chains. His hand closed around the hammer's cold handle. He breathed once, ragged, unsteady. Then he stood. The others froze. Collins' grin vanished. He never expected the dare to go this far. Michael raised the hammer. Mike, don't, Avery said, voice trembling with urgency. But Michael didn't hear anything, not the warnings, not the fear, not even his own conscience. He heard only the echo of his own challenge from weeks before. If God is real, let him stop me. The hammer came down, hard. Wood split. The statue toppled. Jesus, the carved, peaceful face, shattered against the table. Silence fell so heavy, it felt like the room itself inhaled and held its breath. No one moved. The broken pieces of the crucifix lay scattered like bones. A cracked wooden face stared upward, fractured clean down the middle. Michael's chest heaved. The adrenaline rattling through him felt like electricity gone wrong. Avery whispered, horrified, "What did you just do?" Michael wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, breath unsteady. Proved my point. But his voice betrayed him. It trembled. The others backed away slightly, as though something unseen had shifted in the room, something they didn't want to touch. Jackson knelt and slowly picked up part of the broken cross, his hands shaking. "This isn't symbolic, Turner. This is desecration," Diaz murmured, a prayer under his breath. Even Collins looked sick. He shut the toolbox, as if trying to erase the evidence. Avery met Michael's eyes. "You think you've proved something? All you proved is that you're drowning. And you want to bring everyone with you." Michael didn't respond. But deep inside him, a small, cold crack formed fear, but not of God, not yet. Fear of himself. He staggered back, chest tight. The room was dead silent, except for the quiet humming of the ceiling fan. And in that silence, something Michael couldn't explain passed through him, like a sudden drop in temperature, like unseen eyes watching, like the air itself holding judgment. He tried to shake it off. He failed. He walked out of the rec room, leaving the broken Christ behind. But the moment he crossed the doorway, he felt it. A heaviness in the night air, a pressure in his skull, a sense that something had changed. Something had been set in motion. He didn't believe in curses. He didn't believe in God. But what followed him into the darkness felt like neither. It felt like consequence, and it was only beginning. The night air outside the rec room was thick with humidity, heavy enough to feel like a second skin. Michael Turner shoved open the door and stumbled into the darkness, the broken statue still echoing behind him like the final chord of a song gone wrong. He didn't look back. He didn't want to. Anger roared inside him, louder than the crickets, louder than the distant hum of the bass generators. It was an anger with no clear target, an anger he hurled at the sky, at faith, at God, at himself. His boots hit the pavement unevenly as he fumbled for his keys, cursing under his breath. Avery's voice followed him faintly through the doorway. "Mike, don't drive. Stop." But Michael wasn't listening. The alcohol blurred his vision, bitterness sharpening what the liquor softened. He threw himself into his truck, slammed the door, and turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, a mechanical snarl ripped from the stillness of night. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, too tightly, and accelerated down the base road. He wasn't just driving. He was running. From guilt, from shame, from the splitting image of Christ, lying broken at his hands. Light streaked across his eyes as he sped through the dark, each lamppost passing like a heartbeat he wanted to silence. The bitterness inside him swelled with the rhythm of the road. "Everyone thinks I'm out of control," he muttered to himself. "They don't know anything." His vision swayed slightly, the alcohol tugging at his nerves, but he pressed harder on the gas. It was irrational, reckless, dangerous even for him. But tonight, the anger didn't want safety. It wanted release. The empty Texas road stretched ahead, long and dark, framed by whispering trees and the faint outline of distant hills. Michael leaned forward, breath shallow, eyes narrow. He couldn't stop replaying the moment. The hammer, the cracking wood, the stunned faces around him. His pride had wanted triumph. Instead, it brought a hollow victory. "Just a statue," he muttered. "Just a stupid piece of wood." But even as he said it, his stomach twisted. He blinked hard. Once, twice. Then, a flash. A figure stood in the middle of the road. Michael's heart lurched violently. The road ahead seemed to burst into light, a radiant, blinding shape standing motionless with arms slightly open as if in warning or sorrow. The silhouette was unmistakable. A man, robed, luminous. A calm face that seemed carved from light itself. For a split second, one impossible, heart-stopping second, it looked like the broken statue he had shattered. No. Michael jerked the wheel so hard, the muscles in his arms screamed. Tires screeched against asphalt. The truck fishtailed violently, spinning out of control. The world exploded. Metal twisted. Glass shattered. Gravity lost its direction. Michael felt himself lifted, thrown sideways, slammed against the door as the truck flipped once, twice, then crashed into the ditch with a roar that tore open the night. Then, nothing. Only blackness. He woke to darkness, but not the peaceful kind. It was a suffocating darkness, thick and buzzing with pain. Sharp, stabbing pain, an ocean of it rushing through his skull, his spine, his entire body. A mechanical beeping echoed somewhere near him. A voice followed. "Stay with us, Turner. Stay awake." Another voice. "Pupils unequal. Skull fracture suspected. Prep for imaging now." Michael tried to speak, but something pressed against his throat, keeping him still. He tried to move his legs, nothing. He tried his hands, weak, trembling, unresponsive. Fear hit him, raw and immediate. He wasn't on the road anymore. He was in a hospital. Lights blazed above him as he was wheeled down the hallway, doctors leaning over him like shadows with masks. One of them looked down at him, eyes filled with a professional sorrow. "Michael, you were in a rollover crash. Do you understand?" He blinked once. He didn't fully understand anything, but the doctor continued. "You suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. There's a fracture along the right side of your skull, and we believe your spinal cord was damaged in the accident." The words fell slowly, like heavy stones. "We're doing everything we can, but you need to stay awake." Michael's chest tightened. He tried to move his legs again, harder this time. Nothing. No sensation. No response. Only a void. Where are my legs?" he rasped through cracked lips. A nurse squeezed his hand gently. "They're there, but you can't feel them right now." "What? What do you mean right now?" Her eyes softened. "Just stay calm." But he knew what she wasn't saying. He was paralyzed. A cold terror wrapped around him, squeezing out the last remnants of anger. He was suddenly a child again, helpless, terrified, lost. His breath hitched as reality flooded him. His legs were dead. His life? His body, broken, like the statue he destroyed. "Please," he whispered, voice trembling. "Move, move." But the silence from below his waist was brutal, final. A doctor spoke more clearly now, leaning into his field of vision. "Michael, the spinal cord injury is severe. We're doing scans now, but you need to prepare yourself. Paralysis from the waist down is the most likely outcome." "No, no, no." His throat closed. Tears blurred his vision, not from pain, but from the realization that everything he thought he controlled had shattered in a single night. The doctor continued gently. "You're lucky to be alive. The vehicle rolled 3 times. Lucky?" Michael felt anything but lucky. For the first time in years, he felt small, fragile, human. A loud ringing pulsed in his ears. The memory of the figure on the road flashed again, bright, blinding, impossible. Had it been there? Had he hallucinated? Had the alcohol tricked him? Or had something else happened? He closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. But every time he did, he saw that same radiant silhouette standing in the road. Silent, still, sorrowful. Avery's voice echoed in his mind. "You're drowning." Diaz's warning. "Man, don't mess with things you don't understand." Jackson's fear. "This isn't symbolic, this is desecration." And finally the crack of wood. The split face of Christ. Falling, breaking, shattering. Michael turned his head weakly toward the doctor. "Why? Why can't I feel anything?" "Because your spinal cord was severely damaged," the doctor replied. "We're running more tests, but you need to be strong. Strong." Michael had never felt weaker. As the room blurred and nurses moved around him, Michael Turner realized a truth he had spent years denying. He wasn't in control. Not of his life. Not of his fate. Not even of his own body. For the first time, fear seeped deeper than pride. And somewhere beneath the pain, the anger, and the swirling confusion, a single dangerous thought surfaced. What if I was wrong? The question lingered in the cold hospital air as the machines continued their steady, merciless beeping, a heartbeat counting down to the moment when judgment would no longer be just a metaphor. It would become real. Michael had always believed weakness was a choice, something a man allowed, something a soldier rejected. But as he lay in a hospital bed, paralyzed from the waist down, he discovered a different kind of weakness. The kind that wraps itself around your mind, suffocates your pride, and turns the strongest spirit into dust. Days blurred, stitched together by the steady hiss of oxygen lines and the antiseptic sting of the ICU. He couldn't move his legs. He couldn't sit up without help. He couldn't even feel the cold metal of the bed rails beneath his fingertips. His lower body was a dead weight, as foreign to him as if it belonged to someone else entirely. The doctors spoke gently, too gently. It made him furious. "Sergeant Clark," one of them said, her voice steady but careful, "the swelling in your spine is severe. There's extensive nerve damage. We're doing everything we can." Michael stared at her, jaw clenched so hard it trembled. "How long?" he demanded. She exchanged a look with another physician before answering. "We can't promise recovery. The trauma, it's significant." Her words sliced through him more sharply than any battlefield wound. When she left, Michael slammed his fist into the bed, railing hard enough to bruise. But the pain in his knuckles was a mercy. It meant part of him was still alive. What followed was a silence he had never known, a silence with teeth. He thought of the bar, the laughter, the dare, the moment he had raised the hammer. The hollow crack of wood splintering replayed behind his eyelids like a curse. Some said, "Guilt built prisons." Michael knew better now. His prison had walls of flesh and bone, and it had locked him inside. Friends visited at first. Fellow soldiers entered his room with awkward smiles and too soft voices, unsure how to talk to a man stripped of everything that made him who he was. They tried to distract him with stories, jokes, base gossip. Nothing worked. Michael could see pity in their eyes. He hated pity more than paralysis. By the third week, fewer people came. By the fourth, the visits trickled down to almost nothing. The military was always moving, always shifting its weight. No one had time to sit in a dim hospital room with a broken man. And so Michael was left alone with the wreckage of his body and the storm inside his mind. At night, memories clawed at him. He saw the wooden Christ falling, splintering under the force of his drunken rage. He remembered the grin on his own face as the hammer fell again. He heard the uneasy warnings of those who watched. "Man, don't mess with things you don't understand." He had laughed. Now he could barely breathe. But what consumed him most was not guilt. It was fury. Raging, directionless fury. At the doctors, for failing to fix him. At the military, for moving on without him. At himself, for being so stupid. At God, especially God. "If you're real," he whispered into the darkness one night, "you did this. You let this happen. You let me break, and you didn't stop me." The bitterness tasted like metal. He embraced it anyway. Faith had always seemed like weakness to him. Now, hatred gave him something to hold on to, something sharp, something burning. He clung to it the way a drowning man clings to anything that keeps him afloat. Then came the news he dreaded. The neurosurgery team would try a rare, high-risk procedure to prevent worsening pressure inside his skull. A fragment of bone had shifted dangerously close to major blood vessels. Without intervention, the consequences could be catastrophic. The plan sounded impossible, something straight out of a medical drama. They would temporarily remove part of his skull and store it externally while repairing the damage and reducing pressure. A procedure both grotesque and miraculous. Michael stared at the ceiling after they explained it. His breath trembled. "So part of my head," he said slowly, voice cracking, "will be outside my body? It's temporary," the surgeon assured him. "This will help protect your brain." He didn't answer. He didn't trust himself to. The night before the operation, a nurse found him awake, staring at his useless legs with an expression somewhere between horror and hatred. "Can I get you anything?" she asked softly. "New legs," he muttered. She offered a sympathetic smile. He hated that smile too. When she left, the room fell silent again, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. A reminder that the one part of him still functioning correctly was the one he cared least about. He closed his eyes. No memories came. No dreams, no thoughts, just an empty void. Like the world had been drained of everything except pain. And that was when the fear finally broke through his anger. What if this was his life now? What if the darkness never lifted? What if this bed, this room, this broken body was all he had left? Tears came, slow and unexpected. He bit his lip to keep from making a sound. He had survived firefights, explosions, grueling missions. He had stared death in the face more times than he could count. But this quiet, suffocating despair, this was worse. Michael wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of living like this. When morning came, he felt hollow. The surgeons and nurses moved with practiced efficiency as they prepared him for the procedure. Machines hummed, lights flickered, and the scent of disinfectant filled the air. A chaplain passed by and paused at the doorway. "Sergeant, would you like a prayer before surgery?" Michael glared at him. "Get out." The chaplain nodded, sad but understanding. Michael looked away. He didn't need God. God wasn't real. God was. He stopped himself mid-thought, because deep down, under the hatred, under the pain, a sliver of something else stirred. Fear, not of surgery, not of death. Fear that he was wrong about everything, but he buried that thought beneath layers of anger. He would not break. He would not beg. As they wheeled him into the operating room, Michael clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. The world blurred. Voices. It showed. The anesthesia mask lowered. Just before darkness swallowed him, one final thought flickered through his mind, unwelcome and terrifying. What if this isn't punishment, but a warning? Michael was half awake when the door to his hospital room opened again, not with the steady rhythm of nurses doing their rounds, nor with the clipped tone of doctors checking charts. This time, it was softer, almost hesitant. A woman in a white veil and navy habit walked slowly past the doorway, her rosary swaying gently against her side. She didn't look in. She didn't pause. She didn't even seem to notice him. She was simply moving down the hallway with a quiet purpose, as though following a call only she could hear. A nun. Michael blinked. He wasn't sure if he was dreaming. His head still throbbed from the surgery, and the edges of his vision felt blurred, distorted, like wet watercolor. His sister sat in a chair near the bed, scrolling her phone. He swallowed, voice rasping. Who is that?" She glanced up. "Oh, that's Sister. Something. I didn't catch her name. She's visiting the charity wing today. Volunteers come sometimes." Michael frowned. His chest tightened, not with anger this time, but something else. Something he couldn't explain. "Call her," he said. His sister stared at him. "What? Mike, why? You hate. Call her back." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The intensity in his eyes said everything. His sister hesitated, then stood and hurried into the hallway. Michael's heart pounded. He didn't understand what he was doing. All he knew was that something inside him, some quiet instinct, deeper than logic, deeper than anger, was pushing him, urging him, almost pulling him forward in a way he couldn't resist. A moment later, the nun returned. She stepped into his room and closed the door behind her quietly, reverently, as if entering a chapel. She was small, maybe in her late 50s, with silver strands woven into her dark hair. Her face was gentle, lined not by age, but by years of compassion. She approached the bed and bowed her head slightly. "I'm Sister Helena," she said softly. "You asked to see me?" Michael couldn't speak at first. His throat tightened. He had seen chaplains before. He had refused all of them. But this woman's presence was different. Calmer, steadier, like she wasn't there to teach him anything, or comfort him, or judge him. She was simply there. "Yes," he managed. I don't know why." Sister Helena smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried understanding without explanation. She pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down, folding her hands gently in her lap. "You're hurting," she said, not as a question, but a fact. Michael looked away. Something about her gaze felt too perceptive, too tender, like she had walked straight into the darkest corner of his soul and turned on a light. "You don't know anything about me," he muttered. "I know pain when I see it." He clenched his jaw. His hands tightened around the hospital blanket. "I don't believe in God," he said flatly. Her eyes softened. "You don't have to believe in Him for Him to believe in you." The words struck him like a blow. Michael felt heat rising in his chest, anger, confusion, grief. He couldn't tell. "Why are you here?" "Really?" She exhaled slowly. "I was visiting patients on the other side of the hospital, but when I walked past your room..." She paused. Her voice grew quiet, trembling with sincerity. "I felt something. A pull. A whisper. A knowing." Michael swallowed hard. She continued, "I don't come to this floor. I wasn't scheduled to be here. I didn't even mean to walk down this hallway." For a long moment, they sat in silence. The soft hum of machines filled the room. The morning light filtered through the blinds in pale stripes. Finally, Michael whispered, "I broke something sacred." Sister Helena nodded gently. "I know." His eyes widened. "How? You're not the first soldier I've met who carried the weight of rage, and you're not the first who lost control in the darkness." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me." Michael inhaled sharply. Shame washed over him, thick and suffocating. But the nun waited patiently, the way someone waits for the sun to rise, certain, unhurried. So he told her. About the bar. About the hammer. about the laughter, about the sick thrill of smashing something holy, and about the crash. Violent, sudden, nearly fatal. Sister Helena closed her eyes as he spoke, her expression full of sorrow but never judgment. When he finished, he felt empty, exhausted, worn down by his own confession. Sister Helena placed her hand gently on his forearm. "Michael," she whispered, "God did not punish you. He is not your enemy." She paused. "But he is calling you." Loudly. He shook his head. "Why me? After everything I did?" "Because you are broken," she answered simply, "and broken things are exactly what God restores." Michael exhaled shakily. Tears stung his eyes, unwelcome, surprising. For the first time since the accident, he didn't feel completely alone. For the first time, the darkness around him felt thinner. Sister Helena squeezed his arm gently. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said. "Rest now. Let your heart breathe." And as she walked out of the room, Michael realized he wasn't afraid of the silence anymore. Michael didn't plan to talk. He didn't plan to feel anything. He certainly didn't plan to cry. But when Sister Helena returned the next afternoon, quietly closing the door behind her, something inside him loosened like a knot, pulled just enough to finally unravel. She sat, hands folded in her lap, waiting, not demanding, not preaching, simply present. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Michael stared at the ceiling for a long moment, his throat tight. "I don't know," he whispered. But then the words began to spill out slowly at first, then faster, tumbling in broken pieces. He told her about his anger, the years of cynicism, how he mocked prayer, mocked believers, mocked anything he couldn't control or understand. He spoke of the emptiness he carried during deployments, the bitterness he hid under jokes and alcohol, the way faith made him uncomfortable because it reminded him of everything he didn't want to face. And then he reached the night that changed everything. "I was drunk," he said, voice cracking. "But it wasn't just the alcohol. I was angry at the world, at myself, at the idea of God." His breathing grew unsteady. "When they brought out the statue, I thought it was funny. I thought, I'll prove it. I'll prove none of this matters." Sister Helena watched him with a sorrowful gentleness, as though she were holding his pain in her own hands. Michael swallowed hard. "I hit it," he whispered. "Hard. I heard the wood crack. I saw his face splinter. And everyone went quiet, even the guys who'd been laughing." He paused, wiping his cheek. He didn't even realize he was crying until his fingers came away wet. "I don't know why I did it," he choked out. "I've done stupid things before, reckless things, but that felt different. Like I crossed a line I can't uncross." His shoulders trembled. Years of buried emotion burst like a dam breaking. "I woke up in that wreck, and I thought maybe I deserved it." His voice broke completely. "Maybe God finally got tired of me." Silence filled the room, heavy and sacred. Sister Helena reached out and rested her hand lightly on his shoulder, steady, warm, motherly. "Michael," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "God never stopped pursuing you." The words hit him deeper than he expected. He closed his eyes, tears sliding down his temples onto the pillow. "He didn't cause your suffering," she continued gently, "but he will use it to reach you. Even this moment, your pain, your fear, your honesty, it is not punishment, it is invitation." Michael shook with silent sobs. For the first time in years, he wasn't fighting, wasn't hiding behind sarcasm or anger. For the first time, he allowed himself to be broken. And in that brokenness, something new, fragile but real began to breathe. Sister Helena kept her hand on his shoulder, praying silently, letting grace fill the quiet room. When he finally opened his eyes, he felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but no longer alone. Night settled quietly over the hospital, soft, muted, almost reverent. The hallway lights dimmed, nurses spoke in low voices, and the world outside the window seemed to exhale. But inside Michael's room, something was stirring. Something neither he nor Sister Helena could name. Sister Helena stood beside his bed, rosary wrapped gently around her fingers. She had prayed with countless soldiers over the years, but tonight felt different. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. She looked at Michael, his face drawn with pain, his eyes still red from the confession earlier, and her heart ached for him. "Are you ready to pray?" she asked. Michael swallowed, uncertain. I don't know how." "That's all right," she whispered. "Just listen." She bowed her head and began to pray, not rushed, not ritualistic, but slow and full of compassion. Each word sounded like it had been shaped by years of loving the broken, the hopeless, the forgotten. "Lord Jesus, you who healed the blind, who restored the lame, who sought out the lost. Look upon your son, Michael." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with love. Michael closed his eyes. At first, her words were simply noise in the background, a soft rhythm like distant waves. But gradually, something shifted. He felt his breathing deepen, his chest loosen. A warmth crept slowly into the room, like someone had opened a window and let in a spring sunrise. Sister Helena continued, her prayer rising in intensity. "You know his pain, his anger, his past. You know the hardness of his heart and the deep wounds he hides. Touch him tonight with your mercy." Michael felt it then, a tingling. At first faint, like when a limb falls asleep. It moved down his hips, along his thighs, toward his feet. His eyes shot open. "Sister," something a feeling my legs. She didn't stop praying. If anything, she prayed harder, her voice trembling now with urgency. "Lord, you who raised the dead and calmed the storm, let your grace pour over him. Let your healing flow into every nerve, every bone, every fiber of his body." The tingling intensified, no longer numbness, but heat, a pulsing warmth, growing stronger, fuller. Michael gasped. His spine felt alive like electricity crackled along it, rising and falling in waves. "What's happening to me?" he whispered, terrified and awestruck. Sister Helena opened her eyes. She didn't touch him, but she reached out her hand toward him, palm open, as though offering support without interfering with the mystery unfolding. "Just breathe, Michael," she said softly. "Let him work." And then he saw it. A flash not in the room, but behind his eyelids. A figure, a cross. A man broken, bleeding, yet radiating an indescribable gentleness. Jesus. Not the statue, not the painting he mocked as a child, but a living presence. His eyes filled not with accusation, but with mercy, so deep, Michael felt it pierce him to the core. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Michael whispered through trembling lips. He wasn't expecting an answer, but he heard one. Not from the room, not from Sister Helena, from within, "Because you are mine." Michael cried out, not in pain but in shock, in awe, in a sudden flood of emotion he couldn't contain. And then it happened. His foot moved, just a twitch, a tiny, unmistakable movement. Michael froze. His breath stopped. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. "Sister," his voice broke, I moved my toe." Sister Helena's eyes filled with tears. She did not gasp. She did not panic. She simply smiled, the kind of smile that knew miracles were possible because she had seen them before. "Try again," she whispered. Michael stared at his foot like it belonged to another person. He focused. He prayed awkwardly, clumsily, but sincerely. And the toe moved again, this time stronger, clearer, real. Michael let out a sob that shook his entire body. I can feel my legs." Sister Helena pressed a hand to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered. "Thank you." The warmth surged again, not burning, not painful, but like sunlight poured directly into his spine, flooding through every nerve that doctors had said was beyond repair. Michael lay there, trembling, overwhelmed, breathless. Hours earlier, he had been a broken soldier full of anger and despair. Now he was a man touched by something he could not deny, could not explain, could not run from. The impossible had begun, and it was only the beginning. A few weeks after the incident, the physical therapy room became a place where Michael felt both hope and fear at the same time. Each day, muscles that seemed long dead were slowly awakened through painful exercises. The doctors made no promises, they only said that if he ever walked again, it would be a rare outcome. But Michael could not forget that moment when he lay helpless, when he had thrown a challenge at a priest. He still didn't understand why he said what he said. And yet, something had touched him that day. During the first week, he trained with crutches. Every step felt like dragging a boulder. Sweat fell in steady drops, but he refused to give up. Just one more step, he whispered to himself, repeating it like an unspoken prayer. Then one morning, while in the office during work hours, Michael decided to try something even the doctors hadn't allowed yet. His colleagues gathered around him, their faces a mixture of worry and sympathy. They were the ones who had witnessed his challenge to the priest, the ones who heard his arrogant words, and the ones who saw him suffer the accident not long after. Michael placed the two crutches aside. The room fell so silent he could hear his own heartbeat. His legs trembled, his knees looked ready to collapse at any second. A colleague rushed forward to steady him, but Michael raised a hand to stop him. He drew a long, steady breath, and then he stepped. One step, no crutches, no support, no one breathed. Michael held his breath and attempted a second step. His left foot touched the ground steadier than he expected. Then the right followed. A shock ran up his spine. Not pain, no, it was life. The room erupted when he managed a third step. One of his colleagues covered her mouth and burst into tears. This is a miracle. Another backed away, instinctively making the sign of the cross, unsure why he did it. Someone else quietly wiped tears from their eyes. And Michael stood there, staring down at his own legs, the same legs doctors had said only weeks ago might never recover. He didn't speak. Neither did anyone else. The moment was too enormous, too sacred, for words. When he finally sat back down, breath trembling, Michael whispered a single sentence so soft only he could hear it. "If this is an answer, then I was a fool to challenge you." For the rest of the day, his colleagues looked at him differently, not with pity anymore, but with awe, with reverence, with something close to fear. And Michael knew. Today was not just the day he walked again. It was the day he could no longer deny what had happened. After partially recovering his ability to walk, Michael knew his time in the military was over. The doctors concluded his injuries were too severe for him to continue serving. On the day he received his discharge papers, he stood silently for a long time, staring at the document as if looking at a chapter of his life closing before his eyes. Since childhood, he had dreamed of becoming a naval officer. The military had been his home, his honor, the only thing he ever truly believed in. But strangely, now that the door was closing, he didn't feel the same sense of loss he once expected. Perhaps it was because he carried something far more valuable with him now. A new, fragile faith. The very thing he had mocked his entire life. In the months that followed, Michael began visiting veteran support centers at the invitation of an old colleague. At first, he only intended to stop by out of politeness. But soon he met men shattered by war, some who had lost limbs, others who had lost friends, and many who had lost their will to live. They looked at him, a former officer who had once been unbreakable, now bearing injuries that still hadn't fully healed, and they hoped to hear something real. Not slogans. Not empty comfort. So Michael told his story. He spoke about the day he challenged the priest, about the pride he had mistaken for military strength but was really just a shield for fear. He spoke about the accident, the days he lay helpless, the moment he reached his limit and realized he could no longer rely solely on himself. But above all, he made one thing clear. It wasn't God who punished me. He looked straight at the men listening, his voice firm yet gentle. It was my pride that pushed me to the edge. He only pulled me back. Many veterans lowered their heads. Some wiped tears. Michael's story wasn't a sermon, it was a confession. A testimony from an officer who once refused to believe, yet survived in a way he himself could not explain. One day, when he returned home after a meeting with the veterans, Michael found a small package on his table. There was no name on it. He opened it, and inside was a wooden statue of Jesus strikingly similar to the one he had smashed in anger. Someone had heard his story and quietly placed before him the very thing he once rejected. Michael stood there for a long time. He touched the statue, his hand trembling not from pain, but from the realization that he was no longer the man he used to be. Warmth spread slowly across his chest. He no longer felt ashamed of what he had done. Instead, he felt gratitude deep and humble. He bowed his head and whispered, voice hoarse but sincere to the core, "I broke you, but you healed me." For the first time in his life, Michael wasn't just speaking about faith. He believed truly. One early winter morning, when his breath still faded into the cold air, Michael returned to the hospital where his life had taken a different turn. He carried with him a quiet hope, the hope of seeing Sister Helena again, the woman who had sat by his bedside and prayed for him when he had no faith left to cling to. He approached the reception desk with a gentle smile. "I'm looking for Sister Helena. She visited patients here a few weeks ago." The nurse frowned. "A nun? We don't have any nun visiting today, or any nun named Helena." Michael paused. He explained further, describing the habit she wore, her soft voice, the compassionate eyes that seemed to look straight into him. But the nurse shook her head, certain. "Sir, I would know. We haven't had any sisters volunteer here for months." In that moment, a deep stillness fell over Michael. He remembered the way Sister Helena had walked into his room, how her eyes saw through every layer of anger he had buried. He remembered her calm voice, her warm hand resting gently on his shoulder. He remembered the night of the miracle, the night he felt life return to his legs. A soft breeze drifted through the glass doors, carrying with it a faint, pure scent, like a whisper of her presence. And Michael understood. Whether she had been an angel, a soul sent by God, or simply someone God used in a mysterious way, it no longer mattered. What mattered was that God had not abandoned him. Michael stepped out of the hospital and lifted his face to a strangely clear blue sky after the night's rain. His heart was at peace in a way he had never known. He took a deep breath and whispered the words he had been waiting to say. "Lord, I'm yours now." And his life returned, renewed began at that very moment. And now, dear friends, let us turn the page and step into our second story.
Street Helena Catholic Church rested quietly on the edge of a small Texas town, surrounded by miles of open fields and clusters of oak trees that whispered when the wind picked up. The parish was the heart of the community, humble, diverse, and warm in a way that felt unmistakably Texan. After Sunday Mass, families stayed long after the final hymn, chatting in the courtyard, sharing casseroles, making plans for barbecues and volunteer drives. For decades, Street Helena had been a refuge for immigrants, widows, farmers, oil workers, anyone seeking faith or simple human connection. Father Gabriel, the parish priest, had been shepherding the community for almost 20 years. At 56, with gentle eyes and streaks of gray through his hair, he radiated a calm confidence that reassured even the most troubled parishioners. Nothing in his long ministry prepared him for the day the strangers arrived. They came quietly, in neat clothes, carrying worn Bibles, smiling too politely. No one knew exactly when they began appearing. Perhaps it was sometime in early spring, when wildflowers bloomed along the roadside. They introduced themselves as the Church of God the Mother, a name so unusual that most parishioners assumed it was simply another non-denominational group visiting family in town. At first, the newcomers attended Mass respectfully. They sat in the back pews, hands folded, eyes attentive. They nodded at Father Gabriel's homilies and joined in hymns with soft but steady voices. No one questioned them. Street Helena had always welcomed strangers. Hospitality was part of its identity. But within weeks, things began to feel different. It started with whispers. A middle-aged man named Carlos mentioned that a young stranger approached him after Mass, asking if he ever felt limited by the Catholic Church's teachings. An elderly widow, Mrs. Ramirez, said a woman who sat beside her in church, insisted that she had received special revelations from the Heavenly Mother. A teenage girl confided to her catechist that two smiling visitors had cornered her in the parking lot, offering to teach her a purer version of truth. At first, these encounters seemed harmless, odd perhaps, but not alarming. Then the behavior escalated. The group began seeking out people who were lonely, grieving, or spiritually exhausted. They targeted those who had recently lost loved ones, those going through financial hardship, those struggling with faith. Their approach was always gentle, always friendly, but always persistent. "You're special," they whispered. "God chose you. No one else understands your suffering, but we do. To why? If you come with us, we will show you the truth the church hides." Within days, several parishioners were receiving late-night calls and urgent invitations to Bible studies that lasted until dawn. The gatherings emphasized sleep deprivation, isolating rhetoric, and fear-based teachings about God's wrath. Members were told they were chosen to join a spiritually elite remnant and warned not to share the group's teachings with their families. Slowly, the effects became visible. Father Gabriel noticed it first during confession. A young mother sobbed uncontrollably, claiming that she felt undeserving of salvation unless she followed the mother. A businessman abruptly put his house on the market, convinced that the end times were coming within months. A teenage boy dropped out of school, declaring that earthly education is pointless when divine truth calls. By early summer, an unsettling pattern had formed. People were selling property, quitting jobs, avoiding Mass, vanishing for days at a time. Families approached Father Gabriel with trembling voices. "My husband won't talk to me. He says the church is a prison. My daughter left home. She told me we're spiritually dead. They told my brother to cut off contact with anyone who doesn't accept the mother." But was nof. Rumors spread quickly. The group was convincing followers to sever family ties. At parish council meetings, concern turned into fear. "These people aren't visitors anymore," said Deacon Robert. "They're recruiting." "It's a cult," whispered Mrs. Howard, clutching her rosary. "I've seen this before. This is how they start." "They're taking advantage of vulnerable souls," another member added. Father Gabriel listened quietly, his jaw tight. He had spent decades counseling the lost, the hurting, the confused, but nothing he had seen, not grief, not addiction, not despair, resembled the hollow-eyed obedience he now witnessed in those ensnared by the group. "They're not acting alone," he said finally. "This is organized, coordinated, calculated." He wasn't wrong. The Church of God the Mother, once assumed to be a harmless group of polite strangers, was now clearly something more dangerous, something predatory. Yet, despite the growing alarm, the cult only tightened its grip. Their methods became bolder, their presence more imposing. They lingered after Mass. They waited in parking lots. They followed parishioners home. They promised revelations, miracles, salvation always just beyond reach but close enough to lure the desperate deeper. By the time autumn arrived, Street Helena was no longer the peaceful parish it once had been. The community was shaken, divided, and frightened, and Father Gabriel, watching from the rectory window as the strangers lingered once again near the church gate, realized something chilling. The Church of God the Mother had chosen Street Helena not by accident, but by intention. But he believed in the power people gave it, and that power, left unchecked, would undo everything he had built. Destroying the statue became an obsession. During meals, he found himself staring into his bowl of rice, as if plotting the exact moment to strike. During meditation, the Virgin's face appeared behind his closed eyes, serene, unafraid. When volunteers reported that villagers were using the riverside shrine as a nightly gathering place, Kanya's jaw tightened. "They gather to pray," Darat told him. "They gather to resist," Kanya corrected. He dismissed the volunteers and paced his room, each step echoing like a ticking clock. Outside, the wind rustled the prayer flags. They whispered, though prayer flags were not meant to whisper. He felt watched by something he refused to name. Finally, one evening, as thunderheads rolled across the horizon, Kanya made his decision. He would go to the riverside shrine himself. He would end this symbol of hope with his own hands. He would show the village that no icon, no matter how loved, could defy the authority he represented. The river, ancient and patient, continued flowing below. It had seen many things thrown into its depths, and it remembered them all. The transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded slowly, quiet as a spider, spinning a web in the dark, until one day, Street Helena parishioners realized they were surrounded by threads they had never seen being woven. The Church of God the Mother understood vulnerability. They recognized loneliness the way a wolf senses weakness. Their first targets were the widows, women who came to daily Mass with tired eyes and heavy hearts. women who longed for companionship, for certainty, for someone to remind them that life still had meaning. One of the first was Mrs. Alvarez, a soft-spoken grandmother who lost her husband of 40 years. She had always been devout, but grief made her fragile. The cult approached her gently. "The mother understands your sorrow. Come to us, and she will comfort you." Within 2 weeks, Mrs. Alvarez was skipping her rosary group and attending late-night revelation meetings in a rented storage unit behind the gas station. She began telling friends that the Catholic Church has hidden the true nature of God. Her children found her selling their father's tools to donate to the mother's kingdom. She wasn't alone. Immigrants without extended family were the next targets, especially those new to Texas, working long hours and yearning for community. A young Honduran man named Luis fell in quickly. The cult praised him, telling him he had been chosen for a divine mission. They encouraged him to quit his restaurant job, saying earthly work was a distraction from holy preparation. By the time his co-workers alerted Father Gabriel, Luis had moved into a communal house the cult operated on the outskirts of town. Then there were the young adults, restless, searching for purpose, hungry for belonging. The cult had an uncanny ability to sense their insecurities. They offered confidence, certainty, and identity. They whispered, "Your family cannot understand your spiritual calling. Only the mother sees your true value." Isabella D. What began as innocent conversations after Mass soon turned into late-night indoctrination sessions. In the parish hall, Father Gabriel found abandoned Bibles, scribbled with unsettling annotations, left behind by confused youth. But nothing shook the parish like the testimony of Maria Gonzalez, a mother whose son, Daniel, had been missing for 3 days. She burst into the rectory late one afternoon, her face streaked with tears, clutching her son's backpack like a lifeline. "Father, please," she begged. "They took him." Father Gabriel guided her to a chair. "Tell me what happened." Maria's voice trembled. "He met them at school, 2 young women. They said they had answers he needed. They promised he would see visions if he prayed with them. He started sneaking out at night. Yesterday he didn't come home." Father Gabriel felt a coldness settle in his chest. Maria continued, sobbing. "I found a note in his room. It said he was going where the mother will protect him, that we are spiritually dead. Father, my son never talked like this. Never. He prayed with her, but even as he spoke the final amen, he felt helpless. He knew the pattern now. Once someone crossed into the cult's inner circle, extracting them became a near impossible battle. As more disappearances and behavioral changes surfaced, the cult escalated their teachings. They spread lies with confidence and calculation. They claimed, "The Catholic Church is corrupted. Priests are blind guides. Your salvation lies only through the mother. The statues in your church are idols, abominations that anger God." These claims traveled quickly through gossip, social media, and whispered conversations in grocery store aisles. Then came the infiltration. The cult began joining parish prayer groups, Bible study, youth ministry, even choir practice. They listened quietly, waiting until someone shared a personal struggle. Then they pounced. A parishioner might ask for prayers about anxiety or loneliness. The cult member would lean in and say, "You feel that way because the church cannot save you. The mother can." They twisted scripture with practiced skill. Verses about God's compassion became proof of the mother's divinity. Passages condemning idolatry were turned into attacks against crucifixes and statues. Anyone who questioned them was manipulated, guilted, or made to feel spiritually inferior. By midsummer, small fractures appeared in the once united parish. Prayer groups became war zones of confusion. Longtime friends stopped speaking. Families argued at the dinner table. Father Gabriel watched his beloved community unravel thread by thread. Determined to act, he organized a series of community meetings. Posters went up on bulletin boards, announcements were made at each Mass, and emails were sent urging parishioners to attend. The first meeting drew nearly 100 people. Standing at the front of the parish hall, Father Gabriel spoke calmly, but his voice carried firmness that commanded attention. "We must respond not with fear," he said, "but with truth. This community has always thrived on unity, compassion, and faith. And faith is never strengthened by secrecy or manipulation." He explained the tactics of cults, sleep deprivation, isolation, financial exploitation, fear-based theology. He reminded families to stay connected, communicate openly, and refuse invitations to late-night meetings. He warned them not to accept materials from the cult. "We cannot let deception divide us," he said. "The truth is steady. The truth is patient. But we must stand together to protect one another." The room erupted in applause, but beneath it lay a quiet unease. Because despite Father Gabriel's efforts, the cult continued to tighten its grip. The group grew bolder. They began standing outside Street Helena after every mass, holding signs, recording parishioners with their phones, handing out aggressive pamphlets accusing the church of being the great harlot. Some parishioners were followed to their cars. Others received anonymous texts telling them they were in danger of eternal death. Parents began escorting their children to and from youth nights. Elderly parishioners hesitated to walk alone. Fear seeped into the pews like smoke. One Sunday after the final mass, Father Gabriel stood at the church entrance, watching the cult members linger near the gate silent, staring as though waiting for something unseen. The wind rustled the oak trees. The sun dipped behind red clouds. The tension in the air felt unnatural, charged, almost electric. Father Gabriel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. They weren't just recruiting anymore. They were preparing for something bigger. Sunday evenings at Street Helena had always carried a soft kind of holiness. Quiet hymns drifting from the hall, children laughing as they ran between classrooms, and the warm glow of the sanctuary lights spilling onto the church lawn. But on this particular Sunday, an uneasiness simmered beneath the peaceful routine. Several parishioners whispered that they had seen unfamiliar cars circling the property. Others said they noticed figures standing in the tree line after dusk, watching, waiting. Inside, the youth prayer gathering had just begun. Dozens of teenagers knelt before the altar, the crucifix towering above them, Christ's wounded body carved with reverent detail, his head bowed in sorrow and mercy. Father Gabriel stood at the back pew, listening to the young lector read a psalm. For a moment, all felt right again. Then, a door slammed, another, then a third, louder than the rest. The sound echoed down the hall. Before anyone could react, the large wooden entrance doors burst open with a violent crack. A swarm of people poured into the church, nearly 20 of them, moving fast, shouting, waving pamphlets and phones, shattering the calm like glass. "The Catholic Church is a prison," one man roared. "You worship idols," a woman screamed, pointing toward the altar. "This place enslaves souls. We will free them tonight." Father Gabriel stepped forward immediately, raising both hands. "Please, this is a sacred place. You cannot storm in like this." The intruders paid no attention. Some parishioners froze. Others rushed to gather the children. The younger teens clung to each other, instinctively moving away from the shouting strangers. At the front of the group stood a woman in her early 40s, tall, commanding, and disturbingly serene despite the chaos around her. Her hair hung loose, her eyes bright with a fervor that wavered between charisma and madness. She walked as though she had been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Her name was Miriam Rose, the self-proclaimed leader of the Church of God the Mother, a woman whose voice had already divided families, emptied homes, and swallowed vulnerable souls into her cult's grip. She stopped in the center aisle, lifted her hands slowly, and her followers immediately went silent. "Brothers and sisters," she said, her voice ringing in the church with eerie clarity, "tonight we bring the truth into the darkness. Tonight we expose the falsehood that binds your hearts." Father Gabriel took a step closer. "Miriam, this is trespassing and harassment. You need to leave now." "Doms," she smiled, cold and pitying. "I am not here to hurt anyone. I am here to liberate those trapped by lies." Her followers erupted again, shouting scripture, twisting theology, accusing the church of corruption and idolatry. A few parishioners moved to block the sanctuary steps, but the cult members pushed past them with frightening ease. One teenage altar server, Jacob, barely 16, stepped forward courageously and shouted, "Stop! You can't go up there." A man twice his size shoved him so hard he fell backwards onto the pew. His mother screamed. Everything happened at once. Miriam Rose pointed at the crucifix above the altar, the carved statue of Jesus, nearly 5 feet tall, nailed to an ornate wooden cross that had stood in Street Helena's sanctuary for over a century. "There," she cried, "the greatest idol of all. Tear it down." "No," a chorus of parishioners shouted, but the cult members were already charging up the steps. 4 men reached the crucifix, They pulled chairs from the choir loft area, climbed, and began yanking at the statue's mountings. The sound of splintering wood filled the sanctuary. People gasped. Some tried to run forward, only to be blocked by other cult members forming a human shield. "Please," Father Gabriel shouted. "You don't understand what you're doing." Miriam Rose looked down at him with a chilling calm. "I understand perfectly. The Mother has commanded us to destroy all false images so her children may awaken." "Those are lies," he replied firmly, "and deep down, you know it." But she turned her back on him. With a final wrench, the statue of Jesus was torn free. The men held it unsteadily, his arms still outstretched, as though pleading with heaven. Gasps rippled across the room. Some parishioners began to cry, covering their mouths. Then Miriam Rose whispered, "Break it." The men hurled the statue downward with all their strength. The sound, a sickening crack of wood and marble, echoed so fiercely across the sanctuary that even the intruders flinched. The statue shattered against the floor. Pieces of Christ's broken face scattered across the tiles. A hand, a fragment of the crown of thorns, a splintered foot. A soft, stunned wail rose from somewhere in the pews, a sound of grief, almost maternal. Others sobbed freely. Children hid their faces in their parents' arms. For a moment, even the cult members seemed shaken. Father Gabriel knelt before the broken statue, touching the shattered remains with trembling hands. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Lord, forgive them. They do not know what they do." He pressed inside. The youth group surrounded him, some crying, some shaking, all horrified by what they had witnessed. Miriam Rose stepped back, breathless with triumph. "Now," she declared, "the chains are broken. Those who wish to be saved, come. Leave this place of deception." Not a single soul moved toward her. Instead, the parishioners drew closer to one another, forming a protective circle around the altar and its broken Christ. Their unity radiated something defiant, something holy, something far stronger than Miriam's empty promises. Then, far away at first, but quickly approaching, police sirens pierced the night. A few cult members panicked. Others tried to block the exits. Miriam herself remained still for a moment, fury flashing across her face. Her plan had failed. No one had joined her. No one had followed. "Go," she shouted. "Scatter." The cult fled in chaotic clumps, some racing through side doors, others escaping into the night around the church grounds. Within minutes, officers stormed the building, securing the sanctuary, escorting the survivors, checking on the wounded altar server, and gathering statements. The parish remained shaken but unharmed, physically, at least. The broken statue lay in pieces at Father Gabriel's knees. He gathered the largest fragment, the face of Christ, cracked cleanly down the middle, and held it to his chest with reverence. The church was silent, except for soft crying. Someone whispered, "How could they do this?" Another murmured, "This feels like a nightmare." But Father Gabriel, though devastated, spoke with a steadiness no one expected. "This is not the end," he said. "Evil shouts loudly, but truth does not shatter. We will rebuild. And the one they broke tonight, he will rise in our hearts stronger than before." Outside, the sirens faded. Inside, grief lingered like smoke. The shattered statue became more than vandalism. It became a symbol of trauma, a wound carved into the memory of the parish. And in the back of Father Gabriel's mind, he knew Miriam Rose was not finished. Not yet. The morning after the attack, Street Helena Catholic Church felt like a place holding its breath. The sanctuary remained roped off by police tape, the marble floor still marked where Christ's figure had shattered. The parishioners moved through the halls like people waking from a nightmare, quiet, shaken, unsure of what to do with the ache that clung to them. But outside, beyond the sorrow and whispers, a storm of investigation had already begun. The local police, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the event, quickly escalated the situation. By noon the next day, Texas Rangers and FBI cult crime specialists had arrived in rural Texas, setting up a temporary command post in the parish hall. Uniforms and plainclothes agents moved in and out, reviewing footage, gathering statements, piecing together timelines. The attack was no longer seen as simple vandalism. It was an orchestrated strike, something far darker. Agents interviewed Father Gabriel for nearly an hour. "Miriam Rose has been building this group for years," he explained, hands folded tightly. "They prey on the lonely, the wounded, those who don't know who to trust." "And you believe they have a long-term plan?" an FBI agent asked. Father Gabriel nodded. This wasn't spontaneous. This was deliberate. They wanted to cause fear control, and soon, chilling evidence began to surface. By the end of the week, 3 former cult members, 2 young men, and a middle-aged woman came to the police station trembling with fear. They had escaped weeks earlier but had been too terrified to speak out. The church attack had finally pushed them to break their silence. Their testimonies were worse than anyone imagined. Financial exploitation members, pressured into selling cars, withdrawing savings, and donating everything to the mother's treasury. Sleep deprivation sessions, night-long prayers, where no one was allowed to sit, designed to break mental resistance. Violent threats. Those who questioned Miriam's teachings were isolated, screamed at, sometimes beaten by senior members. Family abandonment. A mother sobbed as she admitted she left her 8-year-old daughter because Miriam had declared children a distraction from divine duty. Investigators listened, horrified. "This is more than a cult," one Texas Ranger muttered. "This is a machine built to control and destroy lives." A major breakthrough came when officers traced the group's rental history and discovered a hidden warehouse 30 miles away. It was leased under a shell company linked to Miriam Rose. The warehouse was raided midday, agents entering in tactical formation. Inside, they found rows of metal folding chairs facing a makeshift altar, bizarre drawings of a female deity taped to the walls, voicemail recordings of Miriam screaming apocalyptic sermons, dozens of handwritten confessions from followers, signed under duress, lockboxes filled with IDs, bank cards, and passports, and, most disturbingly, a digital folder titled Purification Project. That folder contained maps, dates, and target lists. At least 6 churches across Texas were marked for idol cleansing. Street Helena had been only the beginning. When the evidence was presented to Father Gabriel, he closed his eyes with a pained expression. "So many churches," he whispered. "So many souls they wanted to wound." All the while, the parish itself was undergoing its own battle, not of law enforcement, but of the heart. The youth group that had witnessed the breaking of the crucifix was shaken to the core. Some couldn't sleep. Others refused to enter the sanctuary. Parents were angry, afraid, searching for someone to blame. During a meeting in the parish hall, voices rose sharply. "How could this happen here? Why didn't we stop them sooner? What if they come back?" Father Gabriel raised his hands. "I understand your fear," he said gently. "I feel it too. But fear cannot have the final word." His calm presence steadied the room. "Look around you," he continued. "Despite what was broken, we are still here. Our faith is not a statue, it is a living flame, and flames grow brighter when darkness tries to smother them." Slowly, the parish began to heal. Volunteers carefully collected the shattered pieces of the Jesus statue from the sanctuary floor. They washed them, dried them, and placed the fragments in a temporary shrine near the tabernacle. People came throughout the day to kneel and pray, tears falling over the restored fragments. Not everyone felt peace yet, but they felt hope, and that was enough. Meanwhile, the investigation progressed at a relentless pace. Agents tracked Miriam Rose's known locations, motels, rental homes, storage units. They mapped her movements across 3 states. Every new clue suggested she was preparing to vanish. A Texas Ranger leaned over the investigation board, tapping a red marker on one location. "She's gathering the remaining loyalists. She knows the heat is coming." Another investigator added quietly, "She's planning an escape, maybe even across the border." Father Gabriel was present for that briefing. He felt a heaviness settle over him. He knew what an escape meant, not just freedom for Miriam, but continued manipulation, continued destruction of families, more lives lost to her delusions. Police tried to reassure him. "We'll catch her, Father. It's only a matter of time." But he felt the tension in his bones. As days passed, the sense of impending confrontation grew. Parishioners prayed harder. Law enforcement tightened their search. Former members offered new details daily. Every thread pointed to the same conclusion. Miriam Rose was desperate, cornered, and unpredictable. And desperate cult leaders were the most dangerous of all. On the 7th night after the attack, Father Gabriel stood before the temporary shrine. He placed a hand on the largest fragment of the broken statue, a section of Christ's chest bearing the carved wound. He whispered, "Lord, give us courage for whatever comes next." Because deep down, he knew. The darkness had not finished its work yet, but neither had the truth. He gathered the largest fragment, the face of Christ, cracked cleanly down the middle, and held it to his chest with reverence. The church was silent, except for soft crying. Someone whispered, "How could they do this?" Another murmured, "This feels like a nightmare." But Father Gabriel, though devastated, spoke with a steadiness no one expected. "This is not the end," he said. "Evil shouts loudly, but truth does not shatter. We will rebuild. And the one they broke tonight, he will rise in our hearts stronger than before." Outside, the sirens faded. Inside, grief lingered like smoke. The shattered statue became more than vandalism. It became a symbol of trauma, a wound carved into the memory of the parish. And in the back of Father Gabriel's mind, he knew Miriam Rose was not finished. Not yet. For days, the search tightened like a net drawing in from all directions. Agents monitored highways, drones scanned rural properties, and former members provided new clues each hour. Yet, Miriam Rose and her most loyal followers slipped through every trap until a single phone ping changed everything. A prepaid cell phone, registered to no one but used frequently by cult members, suddenly reappeared on the grid. The signal bounced off a tower near an abandoned roadside motel outside Houston, a place long forgotten by travelers and now claimed by shadows and mildew. Within hours, the rundown property was surrounded. The operation began just after midnight. Police cruisers, unmarked FBI vehicles, and Texas Rangers moved into position silently. Officers whispered final instructions. Flashlights were covered, body cams clicked on. The motel stood eerily still, its broken neon sign flickering, its windows blackened as though the building itself were holding its breath. A ranger raised his fist. The teams advanced. The first door burst open with a splintering crack. Agents stormed in, shouting commands. 2 cult members screamed and tried to run, but officers restrained them quickly. From the far end of the balcony, another door flew open. 3 followers charged out with makeshift weapons. A broken lamp, a sharpened metal rod, a heavy book they swung like a hammer. Officers clashed with them in a flurry of shouted warnings and scuffling feet. One tried to push a ranger over the railing, but was subdued before anyone fell. Across the courtyard, a woman leapt from a window and sprinted toward the highway. A K-9 unit intercepted her before she reached the fence. Miriam Rose was the only one who did not run. When FBI agents entered her room, they found her seated in the dark, legs crossed, eyes wide and glassy, as if she had been waiting for them. Her hair hung loose around her face, and she held a crumpled pamphlet depicting her mother deity. She did not flinch when agents handcuffed her, but as she was led outside, she lifted her head toward the black sky and screamed, "The mother's kingdom collapses. The idols will drown in fire. None can stop the rising." Her voice carried across the parking lot, echoing between the concrete walls. Even her followers shuddered at the sound. For the first time, she looked afraid. In custody, Miriam Rose refused all direct questions. She sat in the interrogation room, eyes vacant, muttering fractured phrases. The mother watches. The idols crack. The chosen must awaken. Agents noted her unpredictability, sometimes silent for hours, sometimes erupting into frenzied ramblings. But one thing became clear: her power over others had ended. Back in rural Texas, the news spread through Street Helena before dawn broke. Parishioners gathered in clusters, relieved yet emotionally exhausted. The attack had left scars on the church, on families, on trust itself. But healing had already begun. Under Father Gabriel's guidance, the parish hall became a small workshop. Skilled artists and woodworkers, ordinary parishioners with extraordinary devotion, carefully reassembled the shattered statue of Jesus. They worked night after night, cleaning each fragment, restoring what could be restored, recreating what had been lost. The process was not perfect, and they did not want it to be perfect. Beneath Christ's ribcage, where the largest break had occurred, a thin, visible crack remained a deliberate choice. "It will remind us," said one of the artists, "that faith can be struck, but not destroyed." Meanwhile, parishioners repaired the sanctuary, replacing broken candles and damaged tiles. Children helped repaint the youth room. Neighbors, Catholic, Protestant, and non-religious, brought food, flowers, and donations. The town had been shaken, but rather than fracture, it pulled tighter together. 2 weeks after the raid, Street Helena reopened its sanctuary. The rededication mass drew a crowd far larger than the building could hold. People stood in aisles, gathered outside the open doors and filled the lawn. A local Protestant pastor attended. A Jewish rabbi stood beside him. Even those with no religious affiliation came not out of obligation, but solidarity. The restored statue stood at the front, illuminated by morning sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. Christ's face had been reassembled with gentle precision, the expression soft and sorrowful but radiant. The visible crack caught the light, glowing faintly like a healed wound. During the procession, Father Gabriel paused before the statue. He touched the crack lightly, then addressed the crowd. "My friends," he began, his voice steady and full of warmth, "you have seen violence, you have witnessed fear, you have endured deception and spiritual harm." The room was silent. "But you have also shown something far greater. You have shown that faith is not clay or marble. It is not easily shattered. What they broke here," he gestured gently to the restored figure, "was only a symbol. Reet." He looked out over the congregation, his eyes shining. "They tried to shatter a statue, but they only revealed the strength of the one it represents." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, soft, reverent. "Faith," he said, "is not stone, it is spirit, it is truth, and truth cannot be broken." Applause rose like a swell, not loud, but heartfelt, full of gratitude and relief. Tears shimmered on more than a few cheeks. Outside the church that day, the world moved forward. Inside a county jail, Miriam Rose awaited trial, separated from the followers she once commanded. Her influence had dissolved, her prophecies collapsed under the weight of reality. Her remaining followers faced charges: trespassing, assault, vandalism, conspiracy. Some wept during their hearings, finally seeing the destruction they had caused. Others sat silently, their identities stripped of the illusion they had embraced. But Street Helena did not pray for retribution. They prayed for healing, for truth, for the return of everyone who had been deceived. As the sun set on the day of rededication, light poured through the stained glass windows, casting colors across the sanctuary and bathing the restored statue in gold, blue, and crimson. Christ stood tall again, cracked, yes, but whole, a symbol not of what was broken, but of what had survived. The church doors remained open long after nightfall. People entered quietly, knelt, prayed, and left with lighter hearts. Street Helena moved forward not with vengeance, but with clarity, unity, and renewed strength. Darkness had shaken them, but light had prevailed. It became a symbol of trauma, a wound carved into the memory of the parish. And in the back of Father Gabriel's mind, he knew Miriam Rose was not finished. Not yet.